Hello, and welcome to Planet First Action.
Welcome, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you all. And regardless of where you're tuning in from, whether it be a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, we are just so glad to have you all with us for this end-of-year holiday special. My name is Jacob Frost.
And my name is Ryan Gordon, and we are your hosts. And before Jay starts bringing up all the different food and meals and everything else that he wants to enjoy during the holidays.
Shady.
Well, maybe a bit. We'll just say welcome back for everyone who's been tuning into this first season. And for all of those who are just tuning in for the very first time, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. And let me just tell you a little bit about what Planet First Action, the show, and all of these interviews are really all about. It's not about debating science. It is not about debating politics. It is a show about facing the future head on. The pace of change in technology and in our communities is only going to increase. And what's more, the future in many ways is already upon us, with new jobs, with new opportunities, and frankly, with new challenges.
And for those of you who know me even a little bit, you'll know that not making this a show about debating was incredibly difficult, that it's just not who I am. And Ryan can attest to that. But I will say that I did promise to not go into extensive detail on my menu wish list for this holiday season. But the one thing I will say is that it isn't a complete holiday without at least a little bit of those famous little chocolates. But yes, Planet First Action is both a platform to learn and a call to action for communities and leaders around the world, as we bring to the stage those leaders who are pioneering that path forward, to share their knowledge and insights, and to work alongside us at Planet First Action, to break down barriers and silos, to bring together that key group of stakeholders, many of you who are listening in right now. And boy, do we have a show for you today. We have an incredible guest who's going to be joining us in just a little while. But being the end of the year, we're heading into the next year, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to look back on, a lot to look forward on. And so we're just going to say, make sure you grab your beverage of choice and get comfortable.
That's right. I am so excited. And this being the holiday special, the end of year episode, part of this is really, as Jacob said, looking back at the past year and all of the new technologies that have been deployed, the new investments into communities across the entire country here in the States, and the jobs that have been created. I mean, just think about it. Just last week, they announced something that would have been science fiction less than 10 years ago. The first commercial fusion system is coming to Virginia.
It is something we've been saying in the show, the whole thing that science fiction is no longer science fiction. Like, that is not only the future, it's here today. But what you mentioned, Ryan, that's actually something that happens to us a lot because we spend so much of our time in this world, is that we hear about these headlines and we know them because they're part of our job, part of the work that we do. But not everyone is as focused in on that. And so it is worth reiterating just how much has happened over these past years, and this past year in particular, because we have seen pilot projects, demonstrations, and commercial deployments across sectors, from electric vehicle charging to residential solar, from the built environment to critical minerals and everything in between. And spurred by the Inflation Reduction Act and the flagship Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the U.S. has attracted over $360 billion of investment into our communities and created over 330,000 new jobs. That is $360 billion with a B. And 330,000 new jobs. I mean, again, it's part of it. It's for us. I know we talk about it so much. It's not news because we talk about it, but those are crazy numbers. You have companies like Block Power that are creating those jobs and doing the workforce development to help train people to fill those roles. You've got companies like New Lab, who's helping those companies to actually deploy at scale as the world's leading venture platform, whose portfolio of companies are collectively now in excess of $10 billion in exit valuation. And not just in those new innovative technologies coming up and scaling and commercializing, but the large corporates as well. You've got Panasonic building a gigafactory in DeSoto, Kansas, poised to create over 20,000 new jobs and bring an additional $400 million in return for the community in combined infrastructure, educational, and community benefits. Or you have Micron's investment, just to name another example, here in New York, in Onondaga County, creating over 9,000 jobs directly and another 40,000 jobs in the community with an anticipated $100 billion of investment over the next 20 years. I mean, those numbers are so big that they're just hard to fathom. They're hard to wrap your mind around, but they are very real. They are the investments in innovation and new technology that are fundamentally reshaping our economy and our society.
I know it's amazing when you start to think of the actual scale of what you're talking about, you realize that the future really is like happening now. And that's what it's going to take. And that the innovation in these new technologies and solution is really what has driven us forward from the very beginning. From the club and the fire in the very early days, to Da Vinci's machines, to the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk. I mean, through today, you have these innovators who are really pushing new boundaries in medicine, in energy, and in transportation, and everything else in between. Innovation is really in our DNA. It is really at the very center of how we move forward.
It is. It is. And speaking of moving forward, and that $360 billion in investment in particular, and those nearly 400,000 new jobs, that progress, that success, it is so important that we continue to push the ball forward as we enter 2025. And with today's episode, we have this mixture of looking backward and looking forward, but it is all with excitement to see the international collaboration that has been fostered and how we can continue to work together to achieve these shared goals.
That's right. And you said it. I mean, like, collaboration is the name of the game. It is really the mascot of what these new industries actually need and what they represent. It is the not-so-secret ingredient to success. And that is one of the many reasons why we are so excited for today's episode. It is one that we have literally been bursting at the seams to share for so long, but one in which we knew from the very beginning had to be our holiday special. And that's because of what the holidays really represent, and what makes them so special for so many, regardless of your specific beliefs or your traditions. It is one that we all, one way or another, at this time of year, really return to our cherished stories. Stories that we create from our own experiences with our friends and our families and our communities, and stories that have really been passed down from antiquity. Stories that inspire, stories that give hope, that serve as really our foundations for faith. Stories that have shared across generations in books and in art and in oral traditions. Stories that serve really as the fundamental pillar of our identity when you really think about it, and also for our worldviews that really guide our actions and our values.
That's true. I mean, for all of you, just stop and think about it for 1 second. Think about your holiday plans, how you're going to be spending your time, whether you might be going to a service of some sort, when you might be spending it with family. All of it, it centers around stories. Because stories are at the heart of what it means to be human, what it means to be a part of society. And that's exactly it. You know, when you get home from the holidays, what do? You share your stories with family. Grandparents sitting with their grandchildren by the fire, telling stories of their childhood, of their grandparents. I mean, amid all of the hustle and bustle of the busy lives that we lead today, it is in particular during the holiday season that we slow down and take the time to recount those stories that matter most to us. Just close your eyes and picture that. You've settled in on the couch in the living room with your coffee or maybe your cider, the family spanning generations from the little kids to the big kids, seated around you. And maybe you've just passed that hectic excitement of exchanging gifts and you pass the night away, each telling stories and reliving those memories.
That's right. Or if you're me, you think about opening up these old photo albums and cringing after all these terrible old photos that everyone loves to drag out. But that's somewhat those embarrassing pictures you just got to deal with, and that's just part of the story. No matter where you are, no matter what you do, regardless of anything else, storytelling and its role in our families and the communities is something everyone around the world shares one way or another. To quote Jimmy Neal Smith, founder and president emeritus of the International Storytelling Center in Jonesboro, Tennessee, we are all storytellers. We all live in a network of stories. There isn't a stronger connection between people than storytelling.
That's true, and we're not going to wax overly philosophical, but that is the truth of it, because stories are how we relate to each other. They are what give life meaning. And you know it, those of you who have that family member who's just a great storyteller, or maybe from a great book or a play that you love, that story and how it is told can draw you in and transport you somewhere else. And those stories are what inspire and inform the actions we take, what we care about, what matters to us. And that's why we, here, with the work we do with our agency, Gordon and Frost, and with the Planet First Action Initiative, a lot of it has to center around helping to tell those stories that really matter. Stories that will help communities and leaders to know how to move forward, to give voice to those who might not otherwise have it, but whose stories are important to hear and to share. It is a responsibility and an obligation of the storyteller to their families and communities because of the power of those stories. To quote another leader, this time the multiple award-winning Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity.
That's right. I mean, it's so true and so powerful when you think about it. Stories are just so powerful in so many ways. And if you tuned in to some of our previous episodes early in 2024, for example, you start thinking about the episode we had with Jackie Logan, Raise Green's chief investment officer, or with Purpose Venture Group's founding partner, Tony Kearns, or with New Lab CEO, Cam Lawrence, you will start to see a common thread that each one of them shared. And that's the importance of stories and really enabling meaningful action, especially in these new emerging industries.
And the story that we are privileged to feature today, especially on the precipice of 2025, it is one of those stories that is generation defining. A true story that has not only secured its special place in history already, but one that continues to inspire and drive action and progress and impact for communities today.
It has already inspired millions, and I'm talking millions of people all over the world. And it's a story that's called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind.
That is right. It is the memoir of William Kamkwamba. His written memoir sold over 1 million copies in more than 20 different languages and has already been turned into a movie, presented by Netflix, which was written, directed by, and starring Chiwetel Ejiofor. The film, as many of you may know, was actually selected as the British entry for the Best International Feature Film at the 92nd Academy Awards.
Absolutely. I completely understand why. It was just a beautiful story. It was just a great story. So uplifting. And if you haven't already seen it, I would absolutely encourage you to, as soon as this interview with our special guest concludes, that you head over to Netflix and check it out. Maybe after opening gifts, you exchange with your family and with a good glass of eggnog. However you want to spend the time with your family, because it is a story that at its heart, it's all about community. It is all about family, and it is really absolutely worth it.
That's true. It is a film and a story that just embodies what does it mean to be family? What does it mean to be part of a community? And to your point, right, it is absolutely fascinating and inspirational to see how that story continues to this day, because this is no metaphor. This is no parable. This is inspiration through action. Now, to set the stage, so to speak, we must head somewhere that is a tiny bit warmer right now than the 11 degrees Fahrenheit that we are enjoying in chilly New York, to a small, landlocked country known as the warm heart of Africa, to Malawi.
It is definitely more than a few degrees warmer, let me tell you, because it is freezing right now. Roughly the same size as the state of New York, Malawi is considered one of the most densely populated countries in all of southern Africa, with 80% of its population living in rural areas, and its economy is really heavily based on agriculture. It's bordered to the east by the 9th largest lake in the world, called Lake Malawi, which is home to one of the greatest varieties of freshwater species in the world. But for all of its natural beauty, the gem at the heart of Africa is truly known for warm hospitality of all of its people.
I mean, I'm just picturing it right now. The countryside, the lake, that all the different fish. You're literally that description. I mean, I want to go buy a ticket right now. And actually, thinking of travel, it is worth mentioning that Malawi is home to beautiful destinations and parks, including wildlife and ecological reserves. In fact, there are 4 parks in Malawi that are part of the Africa Parks Foundation, the nonprofit dedicated to the conservation and management by working with local and government leaders and communities of those areas. And it's been supported by one of the most important international leaders, by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, who now serves on the board of African Parks following nearly a decade of service to the organization.
That's right. And if you're going to travel, as we know most of you will in 2025, there's another organization that's launched by Prince Harry himself, actually, and it's called Travelist, which is really doing the critical work of making travel and tourism more sustainable. And it brings together some of the biggest names in travel and technology, from Google and Expedia to MasterCard and Visa to Amadeus and Skyscanner and more. They want to achieve the goal of changing the way that we travel for good. And specifically what they enable is really this collaboration to provide us each clear and credible and consistent information that enables individuals to make more informed decisions and travel choices. So if you're even remotely considering traveling over the next coming year, you should definitely check out Travelist.org because it is such an important area and they're doing such incredible work. And while you're making those new memories and creating those new stories, you can do so in a way that you'll have a better understanding of the impact of those decisions.
It's true. And it is honestly one of those things that is critically important and this is something that kudos certainly to Prince Harry and to the team over at Travelist, because travel can be one of those things that can have tremendous impact. It can have a tremendous negative impact if it's not done well, but when it is done well, it can actually serve to really help communities and support them. And we have to say, specifically with that idea of travel, and especially with all of the incredible work that is coming to life in Africa, driven by the top universities working alongside the United Nations to those grassroots movements of local communities, Ryan and I are just so excited for the team and the Planet First Action Initiative to arrive in Malawi and across the continent in this coming year, as these stories of today and our future are being written. And Prince Harry, just to close out that thought, he is definitely one of those leaders to watch. With the work he and his wife, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, are doing across the international stage, from the large corporations to directly working even in some of the smallest communities, they are those who are making a difference. In fact, Harry was named one of Time 100's in climate just this year for his work with Travelist. But we digress. And to zero in even further on the stage for today's story and conversation, we arrive in a small village named Wimbe within the Kasungu district of Malawi, where William Kamkwamba was a young teenager in the early 2000s.
And at that time, Malawi and the broader region were really suffering from drought, which crippled the economy. And it resulted in famine for really much of the country. And we just won't spoil the story for those of you who haven't really had a chance to watch or read it yet, but we'll simply say it's really a story of human spirit, of ingenuity, and frankly, of largely talent. It's really directed into solving what this overwhelming challenge is and really saving one's family and their community with really a crescendo to the story that really leaves few eyes dry.
I know. I'm not ashamed at all to say that I did lose it a bit after watching the end of the film for the first time.
Absolutely. It's so touching a bit about how they really interact as a family and really some of the consequences of their decisions. But it's really a story where the hero doesn't arrive and swoop in from some distant place, but it really emerges from within. And against all odds, he innovates and he finds a path forward.
That's it. And that's that common thread we're talking about. It is the inner relationship and the dynamics of the story, but also of the innovation. And speaking of innovation, for today's episode with our special guest, we are just delighted to be situated within one of the new iconic buildings at the heart of innovation in Brooklyn. We are just a short walk away from the world's leading venture platform, New Lab, which is the usual home for episodes featuring these incredible leaders in the first season of the Planet First Action series. But we are still within the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Today, we are fortunate to share this story from Dock 72, the largest commercial building developed in New York City outside of Manhattan in decades. Its design and its purpose celebrates the industrial and maritime history, while supporting the incredible innovation that is coming out of the Navy Yard today, in particular with some incredible co-working space where that collaboration can happen. 16 stories tall and over 670,000 square feet, Dock 72 has become an icon of the engine of the future that is the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Absolutely, and it is frankly gorgeous, and it's designed to create the space for community, to live and work, and to inspire innovation. It is really an incredible place to have this conversation and to invite in our special guest to share that story, the story of how the boy who harnessed the wind continues to this day.
And with that, we are just so incredibly excited to be joined today by Sabrina Yegela, who is a visionary leader who has already achieved outside impact in her ventures and for the communities she has supported. A founder and an entrepreneur, she owns her own business focused on social impact and sustainable agriculture and has held leadership positions across public and private sector organizations, including her strategic leadership at the Swedish Embassy focused on reform initiatives, poverty reduction, and the promotion of democracy and human rights.
That's right. And while you're here, even more from Sabrina herself in just a moment. We'll just say it is difficult to fully capture the tremendous impact her leadership has already had, and how she sets the model and example for others to follow with regard to how you can lead and truly achieve impact by aligning your actions with your values. She's absolutely brilliant, and what will jump right out at you is how many different areas she is driving forward at the same time, including the one that we'll dive into today, which is her work with Moving Windmills and the organization that grew out of William Kamkwamba, original innovation and ingenuity.
And now, beyond surviving, and drawing from the experience and expertise of leaders like Sabrina Yegela, Moving Windmills is changing the paradigm, changing what you see if you do watch that film or if you read the book of what William himself had to do, and shifting from a framework about surviving to one of thriving, and being able to share that economic and community development and prosperity, and really, specifically, to share the opportunity for all to be able to learn and harness their own entrepreneurial talents.
Absolutely. And we just cannot wait to get this conversation started. And our holiday wish for you all listening in, this conversation with Sabrina Yegela, this story of the boy who harnessed the wind and now moving windmills, and how it informs not only how we can more effectively live and work in community, but also how we can care about one another and collaborate together. But that is also the story that inspires and gives hope during this holiday season and as we transition into this coming year in 2025.
That's exactly it. That is our wish, especially for this group of key stakeholders, the founders, the investors, those community leaders, and more, all of you who make up the Planet First Action community. Because as New Lab CEO Cam Lawrence said at the very beginning, being a founder, being an entrepreneur, being someone who's trying to make a difference, it is the loneliest journey. And those who succeed are those with the most resilience. And so that's it. That's our wish, especially with William Kamkwamba's story as the boy who harnessed the wind, and how that ingenuity is continuing to magnify its impact in scope and scale, that story feeds your energy reserves, that it refills your hope, that you are invigorated and inspired as we head into 2025.
That's right. If you're looking for inspiration, this is it. Without further ado, Planet First Action welcomes Sabrina Yegela.
Hi.
Hello.
So good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you. I'm coming in. Yes.
Thanks so much for
Please.
taking the time.
Thank you. Absolutely. Please have a seat.
This has been an incredible Climate Week, NYC 2024, and it is not stopping, but we're so happy that you took the time to come join us on Planet First Action. Bryan and I, we love all the work we're going to get into. There's so much, but just again, thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, so excited for this conversation. And Climate Week has been a whirlwind, but it's incredible the things that are happening.
Yeah, right? The energy that's here, you can really feel the dynamicism in terms of people actually trying to get the real hard work done, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into everything else, because you just have such an amazing resume and then also just have done such amazing work, like before we do all that, let's have our audience tell you a little bit more about yourself, what you've been doing, and then also a little bit more about Moving Windmills as well.
Yes. Oh, where do I start? Okay. So about me, I'm originally from Tanzania. I am a social entrepreneur. I own an agribusiness called Bantu Vegan, where we practice regenerative farming and we use sustainable and ethical entrepreneurship to drive economic change in Tanzania and in our communities. And I'm also enrolled in a business school program at London Business School. I'm doing my second year of my MBA program. And I work with Moving Windmills, more importantly, in driving forward some of their social entrepreneurial projects, because we have found that it helps to include social enterprise when you're talking about sustainable development, when you're talking about community development, when you're talking about Africa's future. And so, yes, that's me in a nutshell, and I'm very excited to talk about any of those three topics.
And I know the ambassador from Malawi called Malawi the warm heart of Africa just earlier at the Summit for the Future. And honestly, it's one of those things with everyone who's working in the climate space right now. there's somehow these amazing schedules. Just like, how do you fit all of that in? It's like, you're doing so much, the master's program, to be working at Moving Windmills, to be doing your own social entrepreneurship as well. It is truly remarkable. So congrats for just the amazing success already. I know there's so much more to come. In terms of Moving Windmills, there's so many people who know the incredibly inspirational story of the boy who harnessed the wind. They've seen either the movie or they've read the book, and they know, a lot of them know how that story is. We've just gone through for the audience that's listening in some of the details leading up to this conversation right now, so they'll know how that story ends. But the question for you is, after that story ends, what's happened? How's that progress continued to move forward? What does it look like today?
Oh, thank you for asking me that. So when William was going through all the things that he was going through, he did it in a very it was from a place of survival. And so after he got more resources and after he understood more of the world, he really felt that talent is not something that is rare. It's actually opportunity that is rare. And so what we have been doing for the past 20 years almost is trying to create those opportunities for people, for more Williams, essentially, and for people to be able to actually showcase their talent and to get the resources that they need to show that they actually are capable of being the leaders of the change that they want to see in their society. So one of the things that we've been doing is establishing infrastructure that is in place to make sure that people, instead of worrying about what's my next meal going to be, how am I going to get water, how I'm going to access the school that I want to go to, or the job that I want to go to, or the markets that I need to go sell my products, we've been, for the past 7 years, establishing these community hubs and infrastructure and water systems and public services and free libraries and educational services, just to lay this foundation where our actual phase of African innovation and the innovation center that we want to build so that people can actually come in and iterate and experiment and try and fail and come up with like bright ideas that actually solve some of the problems that they're experiencing. And so that's where we are at this nexus of building our innovation center after we have seen and piloted the original phase, what we call phase 0, because we had to kind of go backwards. And yeah, there's like a lot of potential, and we're finally ready now to go beyond the potential and actually do the work and lead the change, and hopefully continue to inspire people the same way that William inspired people 20 years ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you mentioned kind of going backwards, and you also unpack that importance of just people not having to worry about where their next meal is coming from. If you want them to be able to have the opportunity to think about things that are innovative solutions and climate change in general, how they're going to participate in this climate transition, it's very hard to do that if you're focusing all of your energy and efforts on your next meal, or how are you getting clean water. And it's the same thing in a very different way for a lot of the low and moderate income communities in the US right now, where there's a lot of focus right now on how do you actually uplift those communities, provide them the resources they need, provide the workforce development, or if it's the new financing solutions, because it is very hard to focus on energy transition, tell someone to care about these larger problems when they have, they need to get food on the table. And so that idea, it'd be great to unpack that a little bit more, because you mentioned phase 1, you started in with this energy, like, let's go build this and let's do this, and you realized you needed to go backwards almost, to start at the very beginning. What does that mean in terms of really starting at the beginning with phase 0? Why phase 0?
Yes, we realized that, again, essentially what you said about if you want people to be creative, you need to give them all the basics so that they're not worried about the basics. And Malawi is such a special place. Like, there is this book that is incredible that talks about like the politics or the history, and it's called Malawi, A Place Apart. Mm-hmm. And in comparison to other African countries within the context of Malawi, first of all, its topography is different. It's landlocked. It only has one major source of water, Lake Malawi, that is their major source of water. It experienced a lot of deforestation at some point, and so climate change is hitting them in a way that is very different from, let's say, Tanzania, where I'm from. And there's all these different problems, but all of these problems are essentially opportunities for creating a change that is just so, like, legacy building. And so when we came in and we said we wanted to do innovation, we didn't want to, first of all, work in a vacuum. We didn't want to sell people false hopes, because we realized that to make people free to do the innovation that they want to do and the changes that they want to do, we had to sort of remove some of the obstacles that were in their way. And some of these obstacles are access to water. A lot of people have to walk really, really far to just get water. And if we go around drilling wells, which we do, and we see the changes that that community experiences, so it cuts down some of the time that is like not wasted, but like some of the time that's like spent just fetching water that you need for everything from crops to domestic housework. And a lot of that burden is placed on women, for example. So when we came in and we wanted our educational programs, we wanted to have a 50-50 split on women. But then we realized that we weren't getting a lot of women in because they bear most of the burden of the household chores and of fetching water. And so we said, okay, let's bring the water closer to them so that instead of worrying about it, then they have access to it. And then, but still it didn't work. We didn't get enough women in. And we said, what else is going on? Then we realized that they don't have mobility. They don't have access to the spaces because like majority of where we're based, which is in Kasungu, it's a very rural area smack down in the middle of Malawi. Again, we realized that it takes them too long to walk to their job centers or to and from their farms, or they can't sell their produce at the markets because they can't reach them. So we started to think about bringing in mobility in the form of motorcycles. And we wanted these motorcycles to be electric because we realized there's a lot of fuel shortages, and the fuel crisis makes it very expensive to get fuel. So we partnered with an organization that helped us transform these motorcycles from diesel and petrol into electric. And we can do this because we, in the beginning, straight up thought, okay, let's just go straight solar. So we started with windmills. Now we're heavy into solar. And this really helps because, again, a lot of electric shortages, rural electrification hasn't really occurred at the scale that it needs to happen, especially in Kasungu. So all our resources are based on solar electric energy. And when we realized that they needed places to charge these motorcycles, we said, okay, how can we create a power grid? So we went around and we realized that the community, they usually congregate around maize mills. And so we went to the community and we said, hey, tell us more about how your experience is with these maize mills. And some of the complaints was that they're very loud because they use a generator that's powered by petrol. Petrol, again, is an issue. And they said that it's too expensive to run sometimes. So we said, okay, we have solar panels. Could we install our solar panels? And in return, could you keep a small library? We'll provide the books, which we've gotten from our partners, Books for Africa, which are amazing. And we just ask that you allow people to use these books for free when they're here grinding maize, and for us to charge our electric motorcycles. So we've created this power grid and this kind of like bubbling economic ecosystem that is slowly growing, and we see that it's a proof of concept of what we think, that if you just work with the community and they tell you what they need and they work with you to install the things that they need and to do and drive the things that they need, there is possibility for change. So that's kind of where we are with Phase Zero.
I think there's so many lessons to learn and so much to unpack there, because oftentimes what happens is that people actually end up speaking to people as opposed to listening and understanding the context in terms of where the problems arise and making sure you get buy-in in terms of how to actually they feel is the best way to actually approach and fix these solutions. Because oftentimes, okay, well, look, even if you actually see the problem, sometimes what ends up happening is that that's not the way they actually see it to be addressed. So just absolute kudos to you guys for being able to actually identify it and then do it the right way and actually invite those communities in and being able to kind of affect that.
Yeah, honestly, it's so remarkable. And there's so much for people working in climate and really everybody to pay attention to with that lesson of how it started, but also how you are continuing. It resonates with a lot of the leadership that came out of organizations like Metabolic and Pixera and Open Earth Foundation that right now are taking this place-based approach to bioregions and local communities that says, have the community tell you what do they actually need, what are the problems, and then take almost sort of an acupunctural approach to what are the types of unlocks that you can put in place that can help that economy to actually start to develop itself. And to your point, that whether it's just providing that power or providing the resources of the books or the ability to charge the electric bikes, that can change the entire thing. And it's this small thing, and it's like you want to, do this massive transformation, but sometimes you have to start with those little things that are holding the rest of it back. And it is, again, to that idea of what does the community actually need? The community knows best what it actually needs and what it wants. It goes back to William's story to begin with. It's that I want to save this town, I need to find a way to actually provide electricity, provide water, so that these farms and communities continue to thrive. And so it's truly important lessons for everyone that is working in the space right now to pay attention to.
Thank you. We're very excited about it. And again, there's so much potential and there's so much desire to be leaders in these communities. And one of the exciting conversation pieces that I have experienced was when we were talking with Pixera Global, and we were talking about how it's about time that Africa is included in these conversations about climate resilience and about food resilience and all these different things, because we do have solutions to some of our own problems, all of our own problems, but we want to be included as peers instead of people that are to be told what we need. So it's really great to be able to say, yes, this works and we're doing it.
Yeah, it's the word that kind of came to mind as you were telling that story was enablement. You finding the issue and you're basically enabling them to help themselves and actually overcome what it means. And I think that's just so important, because you're being so surgical in how to do just that thing. So to move a little bit to a different topic, we're in the wonderful Brooklyn Navy Yard. New Lab is just down the street. It's one of probably the preeminent innovation hubs globally. They do such a fantastic job with being able to drive what the future of mobility is going to be, how you actually move goods and services. They just do such a bang-up job about trying to look ahead and how you actually forge new pathways and how you actually need to look at it systemically as this innovation hub. But as you mentioned already, you guys yourselves are actually looking into what does an innovation hub look like in Malawi. And then my question to you is, how does that look like in the overall broader context of your business?
So everything that we're doing is rooted in agriculture. It's rooted in sustainable agriculture, which we believe is the future for a space that we work in, like rural Malawi. Actually, as a country itself, Malawi is very heavily involved in agriculture. About 80% of people in Malawi are involved in agriculture in some way, particularly as subsistence, small-scale agricultural producers. And so when we came in, we quickly realized that the community that we live in, that we're working in, are farmers. Majority of them are farmers. And so when we were talking to them, when we were realizing some of the solutions to some of the problems that they were facing, they all had to be surrounding this thing called agriculture. And so even our innovation center, one of the biggest parts of that is going to be the agricultural systems. It's going to be the technology that is required to make agriculture more profitable and more sustainable and more resilient to climate change. Because again, Africa is feeling the burden of climate change in ways that are very not perceivable when we're in Brooklyn, and so a lot of the things that we're facing are soil depletion. Like the soil is not very conducive to sustaining monoculture for very long. And so we're teaching and we're practicing, and we have demonstration farms that are smaller community hubs that we're going to have at a larger scale at the Innovation Center. These demonstration farms are teaching permaculture, they're teaching rotational cropping, they're teaching how we're using solar power to pump water and how to do it in a precision way that is not wasteful, but also is conducive for growth and for life. And then we're also adding this aspect of value addition to agriculture, because for a long time, Malawi has been reliant on just sending out raw materials. In particular, they were more involved in selling tobacco. which if you look at the world market, the price has halved in like the past 5 years. And so for an economy so dependent on exporting tobacco, when the price of tobacco is not doing so well, what does this mean for the small farmers that now have to use the small profit that they've gotten from selling tobacco to then buy food and then to buy necessities? And so we're trying to work in a way that ensures that that farmer is exposed to information which involves education, literacy, but in a way that actually sustains his livelihood, which is around farming, which is around making sure that they can get market access, making sure that they have entrepreneurial studies, making sure that they're understanding some of the new old ways of doing. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And it's interesting because there are so many common threads that we're seeing in terms of those working when it comes to climate action right now, and the importance of being place-based and the importance of community, not just because we are, at the end of the day, a community of humans, and humans are the ones who are experiencing these effects, and that is part of why we are driven to be able to mitigate the worst consequences because of the impact on human lives. But it is also speaks to the efficacy of the solutions that require us to come together as communities to be able to share information too, as you mentioned, the ability to actually provide those resources and the tools. And so that is actually something that doesn't just happen in the digital sphere necessarily. There is a real importance to having a central place, and as you mentioned, innovation hub that can actually provide that teaching, provide that access, and as you mentioned earlier, be that sort of stimulus of economic development, if it's with solar panels, if it's with windmills, if it's with charging ports for new electric vehicles, what can actually unlock that growth and have that actually pair with the new education and resources, not to mention the preparation for adaptation to the changing climate, because those are the things that are going to continue happening, especially when it comes to things like farming, one of those occupations and areas of the economy that is particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And so that importance of being place-based is not lost on a lot of people, and increasingly gaining prominence. And as Ryan mentioned, just being here right outside New Lab, which is one of the leaders, one of the models of taking that place-based approach. How do you help the local community, but also harness the local community to continue to propel forward climate action? I think a question for you is, with that idea of there's Climate Week NYC happening right here. We've got the UN General Assembly, which had the kickoff with the Summit for the Future. For Ryan and I being there was this sense of something's a little bit different. Maybe it is now we're finally starting to really collectively listen to each other a little bit more than we have in the past. And so when you're thinking about that context, we've got world leaders that are maybe paying a little bit more attention, in particular the world leaders and the business leaders, and you're looking at the project with Moving Windmills and what it takes to get to the next phase. What would you want to say to those world leaders, the business leaders, the policymakers, if they are listening? What would be the most helpful? What are the things that are the challenges that are holding back faster and more broader progress for Moving Windmills?
Oh, that's a good question. So obviously one of the things that is challenging is access to capital, access to financing, access to solutions that are kind of challenging for a emerging economy, because access to capital within Malawi is challenging itself. And so one of the reasons why Moving Windmills is wanting to build the center in the first place is want to invite in different players from public, private, university institutions, research institutions to come in and actually join us in this work together. Because not just financing, but even the aspect of ideation and creativity. We cannot continue development in silos. We cannot have people that are making decisions, like you said, in a very foreign place about a foreign place. We need to be at the table at the same time, having these conversations, listening to each other, like you said, and also including this continent that has, again, experienced a lot of climate change that most likely have not contributed majority of that climate change, but we're experiencing a majority of it because we're not yet adapted to it, or might not have the technologies to adapt to it. But there is so much work that is being done in Africa, across the continent in different ways to try and then like leapfrog, first of all, over some of the problems that we've seen like the global north do, or some of the mistakes that we've seen the global north do. So Moving Windmills, we jumped right into solar, we jumped right into electric mobility. We have this saying where we say we want to use appropriate technology. And so we might not need the fanciest technology, but we might need the technology that works for us to make sure that we are using it in a way that actually makes sense to us, that is sustainable in the long run, that we can maintain in the long run. So I think an open mind to, first off, welcome some solutions that might not necessarily be the blueprint that, let's say, people at here are thinking are the blueprint, but to invite Africa into the conversation and to listen to what we're doing, especially young people who are looking at what the older generation has done and saying, actually, I don't want anything to do with this. I want to completely change the narrative. I want to completely do and involve ethics and morality and sustainability and climate action from the beginning so that the next generation can actually benefit from it. So I would say an open mind, some open wallets as well, and a willingness to actually learn from Africa instead of tell Africa what to do all the time.
No, I think that's so important. And like you said, I mean, you have to start at the community level. If you're not asking the right people, you're not going to get the answers that are going to be able to matter most and affect the most change. And I think something that you actually mentioned earlier, and I don't think we spent enough time on it, but is just so important, is that the realization is that you actually need space to innovate. And I'm not talking about physical space, while how important that is, but you need mental space. You need the security, the space of security, to actually allow the brain capacity to focus on how to actually innovate. And the work that you're doing, not only are you just providing the water, but you're talking about the healthcare, you're talking about providing food, all these basic essentials that people need in order to actually provide that space to really promote growth, generally speaking, for a general broader economy. And I think that's just amazing that you're able to do that on such a large level that actually is scalable. But in looking at that and thinking about how impactful that has already been, and how transportable I think that model can be throughout the rest of the continent. What other hope has you actually seen just being in this amazing New York City Climate Week? What other things have actually given you hope?
Just looking at the scale and looking at the conversations that are being had about climate change, I think we are at a very different time right now when it comes to climate change discussions. I would say just 20 years ago, it was completely different. People were not really on board with the changes that need to be made because change is hard for anybody, no matter how many resources you have. And one thing that did give me hope is seeing how so many people are ready to do the painful work, to do the painful change work, and habits. Changing habits is also a very challenging thing. But I can see that policymakers, government, private entities as well, which if you see businesses involved in climate change, it's such a good signaling that not only is it timely, but it's also profitable to be involved in climate change. And even us as a nonprofit, we are aware that we need an element of social enterprise. And that's why we are expanding our electric mobility when it comes to getting access to multi-ton trucks that are electrical and half-ton trucks that are run on electricity, because we want to keep this ecosystem of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship and enterprise going as well, because we recognize the need to skirt between for-profit and for-public and for-planet. And so I love seeing all these entities coming in and talking with so much promise and so much passion about doing the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. it's amazing. And you also touched on something that's really been important and been such a focus for the UN General Assembly this week and the Summit for the Future, which is part of the reason why there's been such a change is it is the new generations that are coming into the workforce, that are gaining in their decision-making capacity and are stepping into these new roles. And one of the focuses this week has been on the importance of the youth, not just because they're the ones who are going to be inheriting this future, but also because they're the ones who have many of the solutions that we need today. I know it also goes just to the intersectionality of all of these things, because you never can really just talk about sustainability or climate action if you are not talking about all of the rest of the things that are informed for individual peoples, but also at a macro level. And when you talk about the youth specifically, there is a real concern about the mental health challenges that have come to life in terms of climate anxiety in and of itself, but also in terms of a changing digital world and how that's kind of atomized our society in certain ways. And so that is one of the other things that's really important about things like these innovation hubs that can actually really bring communities together, because it is refining ourselves in terms of the way we actually relate to each other in the same space physically, as opposed to being so distant. And that's one of those things where it is, yes, it may be focused on sustainability in and of itself, it may be focused on economic development, but there are so many other benefits in terms of just human health, how we relate, that they themselves are important to the success of our initiatives. And it's one of those things that everyone that is working in climate should pay attention to, that it's not ever just decarbonizing by itself. Yes, we need to decarbonize, but there is a whole lot more to the picture when it comes to a truly sustainable future. And so when we're talking about these issues, they really are intersectional. And part of the other important element that being place-based brings is the ability to actually communicate with each other through art. Because art is in many ways, it's a physical thing. Yes, there is digital art, and that is important. But when it comes to physical structures and art that can inspire action, that can actually address mental health issues in many ways, when you see that inspirational work, that is something that also goes hand in hand with the innovation work itself, the technology side, but not forgetting the importance of culture and how important art is to our humanity and also to our ability to effectively work when it comes to climate change.
Yes, I completely agree. And I'm glad you brought that up and that you remembered it, because when we first started, we were just focusing on STEM. Because like William is still tinkering away every day. He is like either making solar farms, or he is fixing something or changing something into something else. And he's teaching a lot of youth and people to do that. But one thing that we quickly realized that we needed to add was the A in STEAM. So now we say that we have STEAM programs, not just STEM programs. So art is actually a very important part of development and childhood development and youth creativity and entrepreneurship and involvement, and also community building. Because again, one of our very core work is community building and community development. And so we do have an art program, and we actually hold artist residencies. So again, we're in the business of exchanging ideas and exchanging ways of doing and inviting people in, and also sending our people out. We actually ended up going to KAUST University and sending a cohort of our apprentices there to learn about solar farming and how they're doing their waste management, which was very fascinating for all of us. But yeah, so we invited in some artists in residences from Malawi, up in Blantyre and Lilongwe, and also in the Kasungu area. And we've also invited some from Tanzania. I mentioned earlier that I have a friend who is Africa's best female rapper, in my opinion. Her name is Rosary, and she is working on developing a program where she can teach people who want to become musicians in Malawi, for example, but may not know how to go about it. And you need people like that to do the mentorship piece and to tell them that, like, this is how you can kind of like break into it, or this is how you can talk about your journey and your culture, because art actually holds and carries culture. We read so much about the future because we see sculptures and paintings and all these different things. And Africa has a lot of art and has a lot of potential. And the youth are the ones that are writing tomorrow's future through art. And so, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And that's why we also do involve that in creativity, because it teaches creativity.
And speaking of art, and speaking of the rest of the world listening to Africa, in some ways, a lot of the world is already listening to Africa because Afrobeats have taken over much of the music scene in large parts of Europe and then increasingly in the US. And your home country, Tanzania, has a special place within the sort of subgenres within what is known as Afrobeats by many, bongo flavor. And so, just as a fun question for everyone listening in, what would be one maybe song that you would recommend that they check out, or one artist?
One song that I would recommend. This is very revealing. I'm trying to think of something appropriate. I would recommend a song called Kanyor Leng. Kanyor Aleng. It's actually, so my first language is Swahili, but this is actually a song from the Chaga tribe by Rosary. And it's just a very beautiful amalgamation of different cultures, even within Tanzania. Because bongo flavor it derived itself from the main city, Dar es Salaam, but it has had such an impact across all the different regions in Tanzania. And I love seeing old languages or tribal languages also being embodied and embedded in the new bongo flavor music, because I remember feeling really sad that I could not speak my dad's tribal language, which is Sukuma. And I tried learning it, but it was just too late for me to kind of like pick it up. And so I love that you have songs like Kanyor Aleng, and I'm probably pronouncing it very wrongly because I don't speak Chaga. And I love that it's in that, and it will be carried forward 10 years from now for someone who might not know Kichaga, but learn it through that song. So I really recommend it.
We will put the link in the show notes for everyone to be able to check out the song. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been an absolute delight. So just having a chance to get to know you as a person, getting to better understand what you're doing for the world, what you and William and Olivia has just built has been truly inspiring. I think not just only for ourselves, but I think actually gives hope to many. And then certainly look forward to continuing our conversations and then just sharing and continuing updating our own audience in terms of how we actually, see ourselves kind of building this new sustainable future, and how it doesn't necessarily have to just impact ourselves at home in the Navy Yard and just outside, but also how these lessons can be really applied and really accelerated in places like Africa and across the world that really need these solutions.
And in addition to that, just wanted to say that we've been talking a lot about the work that you're doing today with Moving Windmills, how you are continuing on that story that inspired so many across the world. With The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, they read the book, they watched the movie, and they said, wow, that is such an inspiration. For all of those people in particular, what can you share with them now in terms of how they can continue to support that story, that inspiration, and the incredible work that Moving Windmills is really continuing to do today? What can they do?
What can they do? Thank you for asking me. So I will shamelessly plug that one of the things that anyone who is interested in joining the movement and supporting what we're doing is to, first of all, give to our capital campaign for the Moving Windmills Innovation Center. We have a generous matching grant that has been raised by the Bezos Family Foundation that will be matched dollar for dollar for every contribution that is made towards that capital campaign. And this will finally springboard us into phase 1. While phase 0 is continuing, we're still drilling wells, we're still establishing community hubs, we're still solarizing maize mills, we're still solarizing schools, we're still doing all these incredible things. And we just welcome anyone that wants to join, whether it's in-kind donation of materials. We had an incredible donation of solar panels that were expired, but any engineer worth their salt can extend their life, which is what we did. And we invite anyone to even visit us if they want to visit and they want to see what's happening, they want to talk a little bit more about what's going on. So any kind of involvement that people feel like doing, we welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. It's amazing.
Really
we encourage everyone who's listening, and especially everyone who has been inspired by that story, to definitely do that and to be a part of this transition, and to support those leaders who are really working at the local community to build that grassroots movement that can have rippling effects outward. I just want to, again, echo what Ryan mentioned. Thank you so much for taking the time. This has been truly a pleasure. We know how busy your Climate Week has been, speaking at events across the city, and we appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and really share with our audience the work that you're doing with Moving Windmills and that story that we hope so many can take lessons from. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you again for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, and
Absolutely.
welcome to Malawi.
Thank you.
We'll be there before we know it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So please like and subscribe, Planet First Action, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Planet First Action.
Wow. What an incredible leader. What a powerful vision. To see how that story is continuing to drive impact in those communities in such a tangible, dramatic way, it is something that we know here at Planet First Action, something that really excites and inspires and motivates us as we face the future.
We are so grateful to Sabrina Yegela for sharing her time and her insights and expertise with us and our audience of stakeholders. When it comes to leaders to pay attention to and to watch and learn from as we go forward, she is right there at the top of that list.
And we do sincerely hope that you had a chance to watch this episode with your family, your siblings, your children, your parents, perhaps even friends or distant relatives, and perhaps with a nice holiday beverage of your choice. Because this is a story that is about family, it is about community, and is the best when shared. And so, as always, we do ask that you like, that you subscribe, and that you do share this episode with your family, with your friends, and with your coworkers.
That is the truth. And certainly to that point, do subscribe, because there are some amazing episodes that are in store as we transition into 2025, including the next episode, featuring an innovator that is building the future of infrastructure for our vehicles right before our eyes, and you may not even notice it. But for now, if you would like to learn more about Sabrina Yegela and William Kamkwamba and the team's work at Moving Windmills, you can, and absolutely should, head over to movingwindmills.org. It is incredible what they have already accomplished and to see their plans moving forward. And certainly you'll find the link on their website and in the show notes, but please consider donating to support their growing efforts and the tremendous impact that they'd have.
That's right. And for more about Planet First Action and our initiative and this ecosystem of leaders that we are building here, and access everything from new research to insights across the landscape to interviews featuring leaders across sectors, head over to planetfirstaction.com.
Exactly. We hope to see you there. And to all of you key stakeholders, you founders, investors, community leaders, and more who have joined this community during this first season, Ryan and I can only express our tremendous gratitude. And that same gratitude and more to New Lab CEO Cam Lawrence and the entire team at New Lab, and to all of the incredible guests and collaborators that have made this show, this season, the success that it has been. And for this episode, thank you also in particular to the Doc 72 team for opening up their incredible space. And last but not least, we are just so grateful for all of you listening in and joining the community for the live viewing, and all of you who are going to be watching over the coming days and weeks. We wish you all and your families a wonderful and hopefully restful holiday season and a happy new year. And finally, Ryan and I will tell you plainly that this series, the entire initiative, would not be possible without our executive producer, Julian. And so we extend our tremendous and sincerest gratitude for everything she has done to make this show, this series, and all of it possible.
That's right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great and happy new year.